the impact on the brand can be significant and not in the direction that you would want it to be. Also, one of the things that we found with music is there can be a vampire effect. In other words, where the focus becomes almost exclusively on the music and not on the brand and the message. So getting that music right and having it cast against your target audience and your desired objective is critical. One of the second principles we find about music and advertising is that it can build an audience and hold an audience. And what I mean by that is we all know in this day and age, we've got the viewer who's in control, so they can skip our advertising. Plus, we have the fact that they are typically multitasking. They are on multiple devices, so their focus on advertising is actually quite limited. So one of the things that we found is not only does music get your attention, engage the audience, it actually holds you through an entire 30-second unit. So as music is used in creative, it can actually hold you throughout the entirety of the ad. The payback for marketers on that is pretty significant because that is truly when they can get their messages across. And speaking of messaging, music can be used to highlight the message in very memorable ways. And the way to think about this is typically within an ad, there is a certain moment or there is a certain creative element that people hold on to, and that is what they remember. Unlike what many of us would like to think it with TV ads, people don't watch a full 30 seconds. There's something that they hold on to. And if that ultimate music moment within the ad is overtly tied to the message, we have found that the delivery of the message is much stronger, and the perception of the brand as unique is much more strong. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Elliot Lum. Elliot is the VP of Strategic Marketing at Columbia Records, where he works on a variety of initiatives, including building out music platforms for TV and online, and collaborating with brands on music-related initiatives.
Thanks, Ann. Sorry. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. And hopefully it'll be a productive conversation with Ann and John and Todd here. And just my background is in packaged goods. So I used to work at Colgate-Palmolive as a brand manager. About 4 years ago, I sort of moved over to run strategic marketing at Columbia Records. And the principles of marketing, from toothpaste to record labels, is actually very similar in terms of there is your awareness, trial, conversion, and repeat. The key distinctions, though, are a couple. One, which is music is obviously a very emotional, artist-driven product versus Colgate toothpaste, they don't necessarily talk back to you. Second is music labels operate very sort of short-term in nature. So we're sort of thinking about what's the next new single that's going to come out. We're sort of planning on a quarterly basis, a real-time basis, sort of like where I think real-time marketing is going. I think the label's are already there. When I was at Colgate, it was very much a long-term planning process. And the third is when you think about advertising for us, for a music label, it's less about above-the-line media. So I'm not spending $20 million integrated marketing campaign, here's my ad. Instead, what we're trying to do is trying to get the artist on the cover of a magazine or on the Saturday Night Live slot. So the reason why I set that up is when you actually think about kind of the way that the labels market, and our right essentially is anytime that you buy a song on iTunes, I'm sorry if I'm being sort of very baseline here, but just to set the context, is iTunes, if you buy a CD, physical CD, that's money that the labels will make as margin. Now, when you think about trial vehicles for music labels, the biggest trial vehicle is still radio, terrestrial radio. It's about 80% penetration. It indexes on a higher level. But then you look at all the other ways, like music in a retail store, music in a like a YouTube video. You watch it on the Today Show, you hear a particular song. So music is sort of ubiquitous. One of the biggest areas that we sort of focus on is sort of music and advertising. And I think to Ann's point, what she talked about before is that one of the biggest barriers to actually using music in an ad is cost. And so we think that there, even though cost might be a big barrier, there's definitely substantiation there and quantification that can be done that Millward Brown has actually done. So those three principles that you saw before. So we've been spending a lot of time my particular role is sort of marketing the category of music and being able to put some metrics in place so that marketers can actually evaluate music from a quantitative perspective. So it's like people admit that music has a lot of sizzle, but where's the steak? So that's what we're sort of trying to provide here. So what we're going to show you in a second is an ad that we worked on with Tropicana. And if you can guess the song, I guess we'll give you a prize, maybe the artist's tickets or something. So why don't we roll this?
Wow.
Always chilled, always delicious. Introducing Tropicana Farm Stand. A great tasting fruit and vegetable juice for the whole family. Tropicana Farm Stand. Deliciously chilled.
Anybody know that artist? You said it first, okay. Come see me afterwards. So,
Wait a minute, you've been promising me tickets for ages, dude. Come on.
Ann Green, you haven't asked me specifically, so come on by. So I think that ad is, hopefully you saw some of the principles that were engaged there. It sort of builds interest. It was sort of the right choice of music, and it hopefully led up to that particular message where that product, new product that Tropicana was actually launched, sort of was then revealed. And so that was one of their best performing ads in sort of the linked database that Ann sort of talked about, based on purchase interest, based on likability, based on positive active involvement. So some of the key metrics that Millward Brown sort of tests. And what that's got them hooked on, if you think about their target, it was sort of, their target was in the brief, like moms with kids, suburban moms, and then they chose a song, if you remember that song, Pumped Up Kicks from Foster the People, it sort of had that same kind of feel. So they wanted to sort of be young and energetic, but have the music, again, engage that audience from an attention perspective. And hopefully if you're like most DVR users, I'm sure most of you have DVRs in your households, is that you hear the song and you actually might stop DVRing it. You might look up from your phone. So we think that music has an impact both on a media perspective and then also from a creative perspective. And that's hopefully a good case study for us to kind of capture as part of the discussion.
Thanks, Elliot. So next on our panel, we have John Dukakis. John is SVP, Director of Content at Holliday. He actually runs a division that focuses on creating branded content and identifying innovative partnerships in TV, film, print, and online. So you'll start to see how our messaging is evolving so that we're talking beyond TV ads and getting into the world of content. John?
Thank you. I was in the music business for many years, up until about 6 years ago, which in many ways might as well be 100 years ago, because things have changed so dramatically. I feel, and as a career, when I was in it, and certainly since then, that music is integral to moving people. And it's really important in the kinds of things that we do in marketing, because nothing combined with great creative does more to really get people emotionally involved than great music that fits with that. I have an example here from several years ago that my boss, I was not under no pressure to actually do this because it was my boss, but I feel entitled, even though it's a brand that is no longer with us, to play this. This is a Super Bowl spot in 2006 where I feel like the music actually really makes it pretty close to perfection. way. That was a song that was written in the 50s, covered by Peaches and Herb, Dolly Parton, and Kenny Rogers. Wings did a version of it. And in the end, this is a Everything But the Girl version of it. And apparently they weren't very happy about its use, but that's because the label didn't tell them, which sometimes happens. But I think it's a great use and great marriage of a great story with music that is perhaps counterintuitive. When I first saw that spot, I thought we'd get a Beastie Boys track, and instead it's something very different, and I think that's the reason it works. So that was a track that was licensed, and then there's the alternative, which is where we as an agency go out and get something made, and this is another example of that.
Ocho, half cap, latte, chino, mocha, doué avec moi. My mouth can't form these words. My mind can't find these words. Is it French or is it Italian? Perhaps Fritalian.
Delicious lattes from Dunkin' Donuts. You order them in English, not for Italian. America runs on Dunkin'.
Anybody recognize the voiceover, by the way? It is John Goodman. And I think, like familiar music being used in commercials, it's one of the reasons that we use celebrity talent in some cases. Even when you don't know who it is, there's a familiarity with it that I think really makes a difference. Anybody from Mullen here today? Please tell Tim Colley that I gave him complete credit for that spot. He made that when he was with us. As was mentioned, I deal with branded content, and a lot of what I do is long and medium form film, and as a result, a lot of what we do with music is closer to what music supervisors do in film and television. But I can tell you that we spend almost as much time on the music and getting it right as we do on anything else, because it is that important to what we do.
Thank you. Are you doing something first?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to introduce myself.
At the end, we have Todd Krinsky with Reebok, and he is the VP of Classics and Basketball Business Units. Todd is actually responsible for leading all the elements necessary for the global success of these units. And I learned at lunch today that he is friends with Jay-Z, so of course I'm going to be stalking him to try to get an autograph. Over to you, Todd.
Thank you. So I've actually been, I'm going to come at this from more of the brand side of things, and some of the things that we do are working through with agencies, and some of the things we've learned are easy to do working through directly with the artist. And so even though the artist can be a lot of headaches and a lot of late nights, sometimes it makes an easier working relationship for us. So I'll talk through a few examples in a second. But you talk about the kind of athletic space and Reebok and why music. And if you look through the history of our brand, we've always had a strong connection to music. We've done the more traditional things, of course, like we've talked about earlier, like having the right music in our ad campaigns, to really having some unorthodox relationships, some really cool, innovative relationships with some artists today. Right now, as a brand, we really have two distinct businesses, really. We have our fitness business, which is our really long-term big ambition, which is to really be a big player in the overall fitness market around the world. And that really is marketing really a 25-plus consumer, out of school, working out 3 or 4 days a week. And in their world, music is a big part of what they do. It's a big part of the fitness world. So we're working on ways to try to make sure that we are bringing unique music experiences into the fitness space, whether it's being a gym or people that just work out alone or doing something like CrossFit. We are really, really getting involved in how music plays a role in people's lives through fitness. And this is a big play for us moving forward. But we also have our classics business, and that really goes towards a younger consumer, that 17, 18, 19-year-old consumer. that's more into street style, more influenced by young music. A lot of time it tends to be more hip hop, skate culture. And so we really kind of work in two different lanes. We're talking to artists and agencies and labels as well about various artists that can play into either thing. So my role really is involved in different genres of music, reaching different consumers depending on what we're trying to do from a brand perspective. But what I thought would be interesting is to show you a little bit about two examples more on the lifestyle side of some things that we've done. But this here is an example of how we used to do things. And this is a really interesting case study in what can work short term, but probably implode long term. And this is the idea of creating artist lines of product. So I was involved in signing Jay-Z back in 2001, I believe. It does seem like it was 150 years ago. I've been at Reebok 21 years, but I started when I was 6, so you don't have to do the math like with Ann. But we did a bunch of different deals with Jay-Z, with 50 Cent, with Pharrell Williams, with a few other artists. And we created lines with them. And it really worked well in the beginning. We were making a lot of money. We were selling a lot of shoes. We were promoting their music. They were promoting their line. But what they really weren't doing was promoting the brand. And so we almost became our own record label, where consumers knew us as the brand that brought you Jay-Z shoes or 50 Cent shoes or Pharrell shoes, and we weren't really getting a lot of equity into Reebok. So this thing you see up here, this worked for a really good period of time, but it's not a really strong, sustainable business model to create artist lines of product. It just doesn't give long brand term equity to us. So we kind of went away from that. And what we're doing today on the more lifestyle side is creating strong partnerships, 360 partnerships with artists, where we're actually getting involved in the music they're creating. How can we take an ownership position in some of the singles they take off of an album? And how can we be part of the experience they're creating with the consumer so that we're doing it more organically? So it's not just about taking Alicia, for example's song and putting it in our ad, but it's also being where she is when she's engaging with fans, and having an organic play in what she's doing and be part of her lifestyle and ultimately part of our fans' lifestyle. So you can see some of this is a little more traditional, but we take a 360 approach to be involved in kind of everything she's doing from a campaign on the right all the way through to how she is kind of launching her music on an award show or how she launched her album online. I think we have a video just to show an ad we did. This is from Girl on Fire, which was the first song from her album that we did a commercial with.
See ya? She's living in a world that's on fire. So bright she could burn your eyes. You better look the other way. He'll never forget her name. She's on top of the world. Hottest of the hottest girls. We got our feet on the ground. Like a match to a flame, and a flame.
So what we were doing there is we were really not just doing a separate campaign so the consumer was feeling something else, but we were involved in what Alicia was pushing out, which was this whole Girl on Fire message. And it was very strong, women's brave and strong message she was putting out there that we were kind of a part of. And instead of telling a separate message, we were involved in that. I love the song, but I was traveling around the world kind of launching this campaign, and every time I would come out to Girl on Fire. So although I love the song, it was kind of brings back some awful memories of coming out. That was my theme song for like a year, Girl on Fire. So one of the interesting one is I think that the other thing moving with consumers right now, I think we all know about content, but it's also the way that content gets pushed out, and it's the way that you show the consumer the brand. And so we have a partnership with actually Alicia Keys' husband here, Swizz Beatz, who a lot of you probably know, who's a very eclectic, cool guy, who's actually we brought on to be our creative director of our classics business. So working with artists in different ways. So Swizz is involved in a lot of the ad campaigns we do, the product we put out, the way that we message things. He's involved in everything, but he also happens to be an artist. So what he did was, in this case, we had an Allen Iverson product coming out. Retro business is really big right now in the United States. We wanted to launch this product, but we didn't want to do it in a similar way that you do basketball product. And so Swizz came to us and said, hey, I just did a song for this artist named A$AP Rocky, who's a young artist, as some of you know. I've actually never been on a panel where Kenny Rogers was talked about in the same panel as A$AP Rocky, but that's a first. So A$AP Rocky's up there in the corner, and basically what we did was it really wasn't really just about Allen Iverson. It was about this moment we created with this cool song coming out, Swizz, a young rapper, And it was a very interesting way of kind of pushing out the idea the shoe was launching. The shoe sold out in a few hours, but I think we have a quick video just to show the energy that was created with this idea.
Swizzy played chess on me before I got here because I was about to rock my joints. It's like, yo, Swizz might rock it. In case I did, he got the autograph, boys. Let's get the camera on them.
Yeah, we dropped the AIs on the 25th of this month, the questions. So I know Terrence, he fresh on his Reebok game, so I had to wear my sign joints
Just
from
in case.
AI.
Just in case.
Just in case. Just in case.
My question is, where mine's at?
So the idea there, and the reason I showed this is because it wasn't an ad. It was actually an original music video. It was a look that those two artists put out. And obviously, you could see there was a lot of Reebok talked about there, but it was never an ad. What you saw was the teaser to a music video. So it was just all original content. Two artists got together, and we were kind of organically in the mix of it. And that's a lot of what we're doing now with original content. So those are just two kind of examples of things we're doing on the lifestyle side. So.
Thanks, guys. So I wanted to start off our discussion. I think each of you have touched on this in some way, shape, or form, but I want to talk a little bit about how the digital revolution has really changed the use of music and marketing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You want to start? I think it's affected a great deal. I mean, the way consumers consume music has changed dramatically in the last few years. I left when Napster had just started to kind of wreak havoc on the business. It hasn't really recovered since, but it really has opened up opportunities for artists, I think, at the expense of the labels in some cases, to get to people in different ways. And I do think that artists are looking at advertising now as a vehicle for marketing them, for introducing them, for giving a chance for them to sample their music in a way that really wasn't open before. And so to the extent that it's being used as a way of promoting concert ticket sales and merchandise, and that it really is looked at as a viable way of another income stream, which is open to more folks. I think that's changed a great deal. Also, the opportunity to do music in something more than 30-second bites is a great opportunity, and really a chance for artists to be more integrated into more interesting campaigns. Obviously, the social has changed all of that, and the way artists market themselves. So I think it's been, a net huge plus for artists, and I think at some point it will be for labels as well.
We hope. Elliot hopes. I think right now it's a great time to be a brand and be in the music space, whereas 10 years ago, it was the other way around. 10 years ago, the music industry was very formulaic in the sense that an artist would, do a single and then would have a music video and an album and then a tour. And they would basically come to us and say, okay, how do you want to be involved? And then we would cut a big check and we would have a sign in the arena or some other very kind of generic messaging to be part of the artist's movement. But the music industry, as you guys all probably know, has changed a lot. And now the artists are a lot more independent. They're a lot more in charge of what they do, and they're a lot more open to opportunities. I mean, it's a new generation, and a lot of these young artists view themselves as being their own brand. So they're very interested in talking to brands. So the magic comes when an artist really understands what the brand is trying to achieve, and the brand really understands what the artist is trying to achieve, and you can really create some interesting visuals, some collaborations together. There's a lot of artists right now that are putting out music that won't be on the album just to promote the actual project. There's Jay-Z that's going to put on an album with no record. So artists are absolutely all looking for ways to get their music out there, and it's not the traditional way anymore. So in comes a brand like Reebok or other brands that have a passion for music and a passion to reach consumers, and we can sit down and talk with the artist directly about what are things we can do together. This is a very powerful thing. But it only works, and we were talking earlier, it only works when the artist and the brand really have the same mission and both really respect what the other is trying to do. We've had countless examples over the last year where an artist we're talking to has called us and said, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to do this, or I'm creating this music video. Would you guys be involved in this, or how would you do this? Or I see this athlete you have. I'd like to do something with this athlete. Can we put that together? So it's a great time to be a brand, because the music industry, I don't like to say it's dying. It's just shifting. It's shifting in the way that young artists are getting music out, and it's great for a brand to be part of that.
So it's shifting and it's actually stabilizing. So in terms of the industry, just when you actually look at the revenues, you see the shift from physical to digital. So that's mainly in physical will start to continue to erode, and digital will hopefully continue to increase to create that stabilization and even some growth. I think the way to think about the labels, and I know there's been some talk up here about the labels, but they are sort of think about them as like an R&D lab for artist discovery. We're like two things. We're a bank, so we give out money to artists who are looking to record, and we're also sort of a relationship broker. So we have relationships through our different staff members with the television networks, to the publicity staff at magazines, to the radio networks. And really where digital comes in is interesting is that a couple different ways. It really, in my mind, it actually sort of powers this idea of kind of storytelling and discovery. So whereas before, I think Todd mentioned that it was pretty formulaic. You try to get a song onto radio. Now it's what kind of crumbs can you lead to kind of create that story for that particular artist that leads them not just to like the song, but love them as a band and become a fan. So I think digital is sort of that canvas to allow that to happen. So when you look at just a couple quick examples, different examples, so Daft Punk, where they were very focused on doing things analog. So they put a TV spot on Saturday Night Live. They did a billboard up in Sunset Boulevard. There was very sort of like analog things that we would pay above the line media to actually do. And then the way that people express themselves, they took that and created that as almost inspiration digitally. So they took that physically and put it digitally. The other example I give you sort of is on the other extreme, which is like a One Direction. And One Direction, for those who have kids in that sort of 12 to 17-year-old girl range, and if you like their songs too, there's no harm in that. They were broke because of social media. And we ran this campaign, Bring 1D to America. And the key insight there for us was that these girls really knew them before they came over from the UK. And for us, it was really important to feed the fans first versus tell the press story. So it was a very deliberate strategy, and digital was the canvas to enable all those interactions and build up the hype. And now they are, after, I think, 2 years, they're like $1 billion brand. So to your question, for us, it's like, think about, for us, digital is sort of that vehicle for discovery and allows us for that storytelling.
So we've seen some fantastic success stories, but what would you say is the biggest challenge to actually the use of music in your marketing efforts?
So I'll start with that. I think it's, as these guys know, it's complicated. Music industry is complicated in terms of who you talk to, what rights you secure, how to actually go about doing it. So I don't think there's any easy answer in terms of the simplification of the music space. It is what it is. Labels have rights over master recording. Publishers have rights over the copyright. CAA has rights over the name and likeness. Live Nation has rights over touring. So it's a very sort of fragmented rights system. And I think that for us creates, I don't want to say it slows things down, but I think somebody like Todd, who kind of knows how to sort of navigate that system, we need more people like him to be able to be savvy so that these kinds of deals can actually come to fruition and sort of lead other marketers to think about, oh, this is actually something I'd want to try and something to do. Because the more companies that get into sort of music in a very authentic way versus just a check, I think everybody sort of wins overall.
Cost. No, it is. I think by and large that's been a big barrier for brands in the past. For a long time, artists didn't want to get involved in this dirty business of advertising, and you had huge artists who you would never hear in an ad. That changed several years ago, and cost has come down a little bit, but it is complicated. We were talking at lunch about, when you've got a song that has 9 writers on it, and several different publishers involved, it sometimes can get very tricky, and you have to be tenacious and smart about actually getting those rights. And sometimes for us, we have to be smart about convincing brands that it's worth the investment, because sometimes it is significant.
I mean, I think what Elliot is right. I mean, it's really, really complex. I think that we come from the sports business, and in the sports business, you sign an athlete and you go. There's not a lot of complexity in that, and I think that it's harder to get it on the music side. I think 2 other things that are really important is choosing the right music, because you really have to make sure that when you spend the premium for the music, it's moving the consumer versus going and getting an original track. I can go tomorrow and get anybody to make a track for me, and I can say I want it upbeat, or I can say I wanted this or that. And so the question is, what's the margin of difference if Elliot and I work on something together and I get a real bona fide artist and a real bona fide song that everybody knows? Is there a big difference there? So you have to have the right song that fits what you're trying to communicate as a brand. And the third thing, which we deal with a lot in our world, is if you create a partnership or even use a song from an artist, is that artist or song, or is that artist going to be on good behavior through the term of the contract? This is a major, major conversation that goes on in our world. You can put all the moral clauses you want in a deal, but once the thing is done, the damage is done. And so, you have to do your due diligence to understand who the artist is and get to know them and really have a belief, talk to the label. Has the label's experience been with this artist? Because you can get into some difficult situations if you don't have somebody that is holding up their end of the bargain from a ethical and moral perspective in the public's eye. So those are a few of the things.
I'll just respond to the cost piece, which I agree with. We did a survey with the Association of National Advertisers. The number one reason why people don't use recorded music or music in general is cost. I think the way that we want people to think about it, though, it's an investment. And it's an investment that could pay off from an ROI perspective. So whether or not you're investing in, for instance, store assets, capital equipment, whatever that is, you're looking for what that return is. And right now, why we're here, or why I'm here, is to sort of articulate what that benefit could be. Could it be better sort of media efficiencies? Could it be better breakthrough scores that drive incremental purchase? Whatever those things are, that investment hopefully gets paid back in margin from the creative quality of the ad, or media dollars coming back to you. So we're thinking about it in a way where that cost becomes it becomes more of an asset that can be realized through increased sales.
So I hear a lot about ROI. I have to ask somewhat of a biased question, which is, how do you actually research the use of music? Do you go more on gut? Do you do research? And how are you starting to demonstrate the ROI?
So I'll start with that. Because I've been talking a little bit about ROI. I'm not this boring, okay? So I apologize if I sound so formulaic. But I think the way that when I was at Colgate, the way we measured it was we didn't know how. So like when our agency brought us the Lady Gaga song for one of our ads, and it was like $150,000, and my production budget was $10,000, I didn't know how to justify that. And I think when you sort of think about and you break apart, and this is specific to music and ads, right? You look at the media side. So whether that's like better commercial retention, for instance. So you can actually measure that through, for instance, TiVo research and analytics, and saying, listen, instead of the drop from a program rating to a commercial rating is 70%, maybe the retention is 5% more, and that sort of equates to this media value. So that's actually a hard number. On the creative side, and what Millward Brown does essentially is evaluate the creative quality of certain ads. As a lot of you, if you're in the research community, and for the creative agencies might not it might not resonate as much. But the thought is like, there's certain measures there that ultimately translate into increased purchase intent or whatever, and then you can sort of measure that. So at least from a conceptual standpoint, that's how sort of us as the music labels are thinking about it, instead of pitching artists, which we do still to, like, John and Todd, of course, but ultimately it's providing a more sort of strategic analytical perspective on the usage of music that hopefully gets more people to buy in, so that if we don't have to, like, the marketers who might not be sort of like Todd or John actually will sort of understand that and will say, okay, that makes sense. It's not just based on that gut feeling.
We do a lot of research. I think it's helpful in many cases to confirm what we initially think. There's a lot of gut involved in this as well. And there's a lot of qualitative work that I do with my 9-year-old son and my, many of the folks at our agency are significantly younger than I am. But there's a lot of gut involved in this. This is an emotional response that you're looking for, that hopefully you have, that you think others will have, and having it confirmed in research is terrific as well.
Well, I mean, we also do a lot of research as well, in a few different ways. But we can do a very calculated, targeted approach to a very specific demographic, and then we can put the product out, and then we can see, how many pairs we sell versus a last launch. What do we do right in the last launch? We are lucky that we're doing launches almost every single month. So it's very easy for us to go out and even just do focus groups or have research through our retail partners or through our own retail to find out, what moved the consumer in the store to buy this product. Half of the young consumers that go into a sneaker store, know what they're buying when they go in. So we do a lot of, sometimes just anecdotal feedback. We'll be in the store, we know there's a launch, and then we'll ask these consumers, what drove you to come in? And, we'll ask them about what was the actual, was it the music? Was it the look of the shoe? Whatever the situation is. So we do a lot of that. But I think also for us, what's really, really interesting on the music side sometimes is that there's so much chatter online, and I know that this doesn't take away from market research. Market research is one way to get it, but in our world, every single day kids are talking about the song, they're talking about the shoe. This is a very, very specific culture these kids live and breathe, and we know where they all are, we know what they all talk about, we know where they are. They'll even tell us what products we should launch next. Literally, you could go online right now and there'll be a major discussion with a whole bunch of kids about, this is the one Reebok didn't launch. I guarantee you this one will sell. This is the artist Reebok should use. I mean, these real conversations go on. So, you can't quantify this all the time, but it is gut, and it is really being in touch with your consumer. So we'll do a lot of that as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of planning, a lot of listening that actually takes place.
A lot of listening.
Absolutely. So before we turn it over to the audience, in a sentence or two, I think you're all coming at this from slightly different angles. In a sentence or two, what would you describe as the most significant opportunity of using music in marketing?
So for us, it's the higher, we've been talking a lot about music and advertising, but it's the idea of like music driving kind of business results. So if you're a retailer, think about music in store. Does that music during that particular day part actually sort of accelerate purchase? If it's music and advertising, we've actually been talking a lot about that. If it's, I'm just trying to think of other use cases. If it's online too, or you're a CPG company, and how do you sort of like think about on shelf, do music downloads, or those kind of ways actually drive velocity? So we're trying to sort of frame it from a music and branding perspective as driving results, and for us, that's the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, I think it, in terms of building a brand, a resilient brand, a brand that people know and feel something about, I think music is incredibly important to that. And it may not get bodies in stores, but in the long run, it's going to be a very important tool to making that brand mean something.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, for us, like, we're in the business of cool. Like, that's what we do, whether it's on the fitness side of things or whether it's on the youth side of things. It's like we want to be on the forefront of being considered a cool brand. And one of the coolest, most aspirational things in our culture is music. And so if you're at a dinner party and you're around someone and they're telling you what's next, or they're telling you the hottest artist, and you go home and you really like that artist, you're going to remember that person as being someone that's kind of up on what's going on. And it's a similar analogy for the brand. We want to be to the consumer. Whether you're a young person that goes to the same like studio class 4 days a week, and there's a trainer in there and she's got the best music and she's telling you, oh, I get my music from Reebok, or whether you're a young 18-year-old kid that sees that video with A$AP Rocky and is like, yo, they're doing cool things with an artist like A$AP Rocky. Music elevates, I think, our brand aesthetic, and it elevates the cachet of who we are. And so it's really important for us to be on the cusp of what's next in that space.
I have to jump in on this one because I think there are two important variables to consider as well. And you've touched on the first one lightly, which is it creates an emotional connection. We know that the strongest brands, both in the present in terms of their brand share, and those that are more likely to grow, are the ones that connect with people emotionally. Music is something that connects with people emotionally. So being able to take that response to the music and transfer it to your brand is critically important. The second is around audience. In this day and age, it is so incredibly difficult to get an audience for your brand. And music is a fantastic way to secure it, both in terms of maximizing your media spend, so getting people's attention for the marketing that you have, but also in terms of sheer targeting of the individuals you want to reach. You've heard about campaigns today that were really designed for a very specific audience, and how powerful the music was in getting them. Well, a huge thank you to our panel. Thank you, guys. Really.